Oh, what's up, YouTube and Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are. We don't have TikTok up right now. I guess I could have done that. I could have done TikTok. We could have brought TikTok into this, but
Oh,
we're not gonna because we've got Ransom here, and that's what I'm excited about. Hey, Ransom, how
hey,
are you?
Austin, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing so good.
Yeah, what's going on in Salt Lake City?
Well, it's a lovely place. We've got a lot of politics happening, which is fun. It's fun to be kind of in the spotlight. We're rarely in the spotlight politically because we're, a pretty conservative state, a pretty liberal city in a conservative state. It's a good place to be, though.
What are you hoping happens right now? We're jumping right into it.
Yeah.
We're talking about politics. No primer. We're going right in.
Yeah.
There's so much to cover. There's 50. There's 50. Some people say 54. I don't know if you knew that. There's
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Yeah.
50, potentially 54 states.
As many
Uh,
as 54 states. Yeah.
could go up to. Who could say?
There's no way to know. Yeah.
God, we love him. We love his old weird brain, and we really hope he just
Help it.
will.
God bless me. I love Joe Biden.
Oh my God. What are you hoping happens in Salt Lake? Because I vote in Utah.
Yeah.
I could vote in California or Utah, but I like voting in Utah because I just feel like California is going to be all right. Like they don't need me.
Yeah.
Like and I feel like Utah needs every drop of blue it can get.
We're out there wringing out, as much liberalism as we can get here. I'm tampering, I'm managing my expectations and hopes for the state of Utah this time around. We've got a mayor that I like. We've got all of our local elections that are the most important to me. Are things that have already been done, or things I'm not following very closely. We've got 4 congressional representatives, a bunch of white dude Republicans who are all going to easily win re-election. I am very interested in what I think is one of the most interesting races in the country right now, which is the race between Mike Lee and Mullen. Mm-hmm. So I'm, if you're a Utahn, and you're on the fence, have a look at Evan McMullen, or take one single look at Mike Lee for an instant, and hopefully that gets you that, terrifies you off the fence. And if you're somebody who's very much, in favor of McMullen, tell your friends and stuff. This is winnable. A lot of the polls are like between 2 points and 5 points, and it'd be a really neat thing for Utah. I think it'd be a great thing for the United States Senate to get Mike Lee, the wannabe overthrower of the American Republic, co-conspirator, get him out of there. Get a former CIA agent, a patriot, somebody whose politics I don't agree with, by the way. Evan McMullen is not a Democrat. I don't agree with him on most things. Be somebody who, would prefer that our nation remains a republic with a peaceful transfer of power. And that's something I'm 100% on board with. And I hope to see more people get on board with that too.
Isn't it wild that that's where we're at?
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here going like, I'm thinking like, because like I want to ask you like, well, what would you sell Utahns on when it comes to Evan McMullen? Because I know that I look at that race and I go, well, obviously the key thing here is trying to unseat Mike Lee. Like that's the key thing, is trying to fire Mike Lee. But for a lot of people, for a lot of voters, they get really fed up with like that being the reason. Definitely. That it's just like, not this guy that I'm voting for, not this guy.
But it's like reaction.
Yeah. But that is sort of where we're at, that like the bar is so low that it's just sort of like, hey, if you stand up for a traditional peaceful transfer of power, and if you stand up for the idea that like our elections are still being carried out in a fair way, that's enough to vote for you over someone who's actively trying to dismantle democracy. And I think it is enough, but it's just crazy that that's where we're at.
Oh, tell me about it. I know. I do think there are a lot of things I like about Evan McMullen. He's somebody who, he seems like he actually genuinely cares about making this country better. I'm sure a lot of people say that. Evan McMullen, has dedicated a lot of his life to public service, and that's something I think is important from a purely political, what is good for me and my state that I love so much perspective. There's also a McMullen angle. Something that I think is really interesting about Utah right now. Utah is both Mitt Romney and Mike Lee. I know I know Mike Lee people, you know, and I know more Mitt Romney people, reasonable people that I don't agree with. You know, we have differences of faith, we have differences of politics, but they're good, decent people who care about this country and the people who live here.
Yeah.
And then you know, Mike Lee, the thing that frustrates me the most about him is he's somebody who says he's this constitutional absolutist, and then the most fundamental part of our Constitution is how we hand over power, how we manage and separate and balance and transfer power. And he's, you know, bragging about working 14-hour days, trying to find some kind of excuse for legally replacing the, you know, electors in the electoral college. So, you know, you've got plenty against Mike Lee, but then you've got in the Senate right now from Utah, the most moderate, middle of the road senator, Republican senator in the Senate right now in Mitt Romney. The only senator ever in history to vote to impeach a president of his own party. You know, so you've got this guy who's already right there in the middle. And I think there's going to be a lot of power in the middle in this very, you know, evenly divided country of ours. Right now, we listen mostly to the loud, noisiest people on either side versus the people in the middle where most solutions are and where most Americans are. And I think McMullen will be, if elected, part of that middle, that voice of the middle. He's said already, so, I mean, he's running unaffiliated. He's not a Democrat. He's running unaffiliated. And he says he won't caucus with either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. As a Democrat, that bothers me. But as a Utahn, that's very interesting, because then we've got these two Utah senators right smack dab in the middle of what will probably be a very, very narrowly divided Senate, maybe not exactly 50-50, but close. And that puts Utah in a pretty interesting position with these two people who could end up major power brokers in the Senate. So, you know, even though I don't agree with a lot of Evan McMullen's politics, I agree with a good number, a fair amount of his politics. I think most Americans actually agree on most things. You know, it's not loud, vitriolic stuff that's good for raising campaign money. But, you know, on top of that, we've got, you know, Mike Lee is terrible. And then we've got potentially these two power brokers. So I don't think Utah's going to be the deciding, you know, Senate race this year. There's 5 races that are literally toss-ups, you know, but it could be competitive. If you're, if you live or vote in Utah, give Lee a second glance. And if you are already a Lee, or give McMullen a second glance, and don't look too closely at Lee.
Or do look closely at Lee.
Exactly,
like look more closely. Don't just go, oh, well, he's the guy with the jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah.
And then, there's a great, PACs don't have to be evil. There's a great PAC called Utah Needs Change that you can get involved with if they'll just give you some ideas for how to get the word out. I've been sharing their content for, maybe about a week now, and it's fun. It feels good to feel more involved.
Yeah. It almost sounds like Utah could be heading toward, Utah, a state which for years and years and years has just sort of been in the bag for the Republican Party. And it's never really been considered a battleground state or a state that sort of shifts its weight back and forth. It almost feels like if you had McMullen and Romney leading the charge in that state, that with the division that the Utah Republicans are feeling, it could potentially in the future become a battleground state where there really is.
It's an interesting place. And I agree with you, because even though it's very, very conservative, it's not conservative in the way that, that like Mississippi is conservative.
Yeah.
It has a different kind of conservatism, this different, slightly tempered, what George Bush would have called compassionate conservatism, this idea of taking care of people and people matter and being kind, and the kind of conservative I don't agree with, but I can respect, low taxes and keep the government out of stuff and things where you can have legitimate disagreements. I love that. There are, most of the Republicans that I know in Utah, I can have a great debate with, and we can talk about ideas and it doesn't get gross, and that's something that I love about Utah. Utah is surprising in a lot of ways. Utah is one of the first states to have a regulatory sandbox, which makes the law a lot more accessible. That's a very progressive thing to do. A very progressive thing for any state to do.
What does that mean?
So it means like you don't have to be a lawyer to own a law firm, and you can give legal advice in a very narrow way. So there are organizations in the sandbox, for example, that will help women seek an order of protection, because they know that system well enough that even though they're non-attorneys, they're able to give free legal advice. And there's businesses that make money in the sandbox. There's all kinds of really cool innovation, and it's a really progressive idea. Utah is one of the first states to do automatic expungement of criminal records. A very, especially so much of the Republican Party right now is this fear mongering about crime, but here you got Utah, beat red Utah, making it easier for people to get on with their lives, once they've paid their debt to society, to move on and not have this thing hanging over them, keeping them from getting jobs and getting apartments, And we're also one of the most progressive states when it comes to trans rights. You've got the legislature being terrible and making life very hard for trans people, in particular trans children. But then you've got the Utah legal system just last year totally overhauling the process for someone to change their gender marker and making it easier and more accessible than any other state in the country. So Utah's always been this very interesting brand of conservative. And that's why I've got a lot of hope that we're going to see more people like Mitt Romney, more people like Evan McMullin, and over time, fewer people like Mike Lee. We saw that in the run for governor a little bit ago. The moderates, the John Huntsmans and and then Spencer Cox, who became our governor, they did very well. And the conservatives like Greg Hughes, one of the first people to publicly support Donald Trump, they lost big time. So I think we're seeing that in Utah. I hope it's a broader thing for the Republican Party, because I would love to have conversations about real stuff that actually matters to people, like taxes and where the government should and shouldn't, be involved, and not these garbage, wedge issues like a national ban on abortion, for heaven's sake. How insane is that, or this constant transphobia that we see out of the right. Those are not worthy of a political discourse. Those are.
Yeah, we can't find compromise on some of these things.
Exactly. I'm never going to compromise on somebody's right, to basic bodily autonomy, to being themselves. Mm-hmm. We can compromise when it comes to taxes and roads and that kind of thing. And that's, hopefully where we're going to see the party go.
Yeah. I want to talk about this more, this concept that I'm going to bring up more later in the conversation, but I just want to bring it up right now, and then we'll table it and we'll come back to it after we sort of cover these 5 main races that you were talking about and some of the bigger races. But what's happening in Utah is exciting because it offers an opportunity to defeat the extremism on the right, to defeat Trumpism and this sort of detachment from reality that's happened in the extreme right. But it's also something that's very frustrating to people on the far left, to leftists, because leftists, the thing that frustrates them more than anything is feeling like the extremity on the right tilts the scale so heavily that our compromise always winds up being everyone sliding right of center to compromise. So we're settling for someone like Evan McMullin, who is, right of center, but isn't all the way on the far right, just so that we can defeat Trumpism. But we all wind up still skewing right. And leftists kind of just feel like the things that they want, the more radical policies that they would like to see, universal health care and these things are just never going to happen, because the influence and the depravity of the extreme right is so intense and is so hard to untangle that we always wind up over on their side of the scale. And I think I want to talk about that in the context later on in the conversation, in the context of the issue of the electorate, because I think that that's an issue in election cycles that
Definitely.
that doesn't get talked about a lot. We talk about the people running, the candidates. We talk about the parties. We talk about policies. What we don't talk about is like the beliefs and attitudes and habits of voters, and just like the things that drive voters, and the things that like the role that we play in this. And I want to get to that, but let's break down some of these bigger races that are sort of teeter-tottering right now. What are some of the big ones?
So the House is basically, unfortunately, the House is one of those things that just kind of swings back and forth depending on, whoever's in charge of the White House, we vote for the other party. It's a weird thing Americans do. We've been doing it for a long time. Republicans will probably take back the House. That sucks. We can talk about why it sucks and how it sucks and and what it means. But the House, the one race that I am watching in the House is Alyssa Slotkin in Michigan. Michigan is one of those states that used to be very reliably blue. Then it went for Trump in 2016, barely. Went for Biden in 2020, barely. And Alyssa Slotkin is a moderate Democrat, one of those, we used to call him like a blue dog Democrat, someone in the middle, where it isn't where I am politically, but, it's where a lot of the country is. So it's kind of nice to see. Barely won her last election by like 15,000 votes. She's running in a newly gerrymandered district, gerrymandered to benefit Republicans.
Of course.
Exactly. And Alyssa Slotkin was one of the first members of the House to call for Donald Trump's second impeachment after the failed coup of January 6th. So Michigan generally and Slotkin specifically, I think that's a bit of a bellwether. We might be able to tell kind of how the country's moving. If we look at the whole election, it's harder. That one race, we might be able to tell at least how that part of the country, the like upper Midwest, these used to be reliably blue states that are kind of not quite reliably blue anymore. We can maybe, read into a little bit that race to see where the country's pointing. If Alyssa Slotkin wins that election, Democrats can have some confidence maybe going into 2024. They invest more money there. They make sure they got great candidates there. If she loses, then not only do Democrats lose kind of a rising star in Alyssa Slotkin, but also there's reason to be worried about that region. It indicates this rightward movement of the electorate, or just the effect, the impact, the desired effect of this gerrymandering that it will have. It will produce more conservative outcomes. Outside of that, I'm not really watching the House super closely. The Senate, you've got those 5 races, and these are totally bonkers. Like every single one of them could be a very interesting novel or HBO special or something. You've got Pennsylvania, Georgia, let's see, Arizona, Michigan. I
think Nevada is one of them too.
Nevada, and yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Wisconsin, so Wisconsin, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona. And 2 of those are currently controlled by Republicans. 3 of them currently controlled by Democrats. So it's just down to the wire.
I've also heard that North Carolina has a tight race going on right now.
Could be there. That could be a surprise. Ohio used to be a toss-up. Now it's kind of moving toward hillbilly elegy, tech bro turned folksy guy, JD Vance. So there are a few that used to be kind of in the toss-up. They could still be toss-ups. Right now, they're looking more like they'll be close, but leaning toward Republicans. Those 5 are just pure toss-ups. If you held the election 2 days in a row, you might have one result one day, one result another day. It's that close. And what's wild is right now, those elections are all looking like every single one of them is looking like they're going to go Republican. And you've got some reasonable candidates, in Arizona, you've got a reasonable candidate, on the Republican side, but you've got some real characters. You've got, Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania is currently polling ahead of an amazing candidate, and a lieutenant governor who just, due to health reasons has struggled in polls recently. But then, and then in Georgia, you've got, Raphael Warnock, eminently qualified, a phenomenal member of his community, and then Herschel Walker with all of his abortion hypocrisy and his fake badge and stuff. And right now, if the election were held today, the money's on Herschel Walker. So it's a wild, hopefully we see, like we've had this kind of this Republican momentum for a little bit, driven by inflation, driven by this kind of, I feel like trumped up narrative about crime, but hopefully we see, that fizzle out a little bit and a few of these races come back. I feel like my gut tells me it's going to end with 50-50. I think Nevada is going to swap blue to red. I think Pennsylvania is going to swap red to blue. I think we're going to end up 50-50. That's, if I were gambling on this right now, that's what I'd say.
Isn't it just wild? Isn't it just crazy that we can be in this situation, that we can be in a situation where, I mean, I think since 2016, because you were talking earlier about compassionate conservatism.
Yeah.
And I grew up just in my lifetime, I grew up in an era where not going back that far, just watching the debates between John McCain and Barack Obama and seeing like the civility that existed there and the respect between those candidates. And like the fact that, I'm really glad that Barack Obama was the president and not John McCain, but the fact that like, that just seems like a relic of a bygone era. And since the election of someone as insanely ridiculous as Donald Trump, now you have people that you're like, Herschel Walker, that should just be a like laughed off the ballot, laughed off the debate stage. And instead it's looking like it's in the bag. Like,
it's wild. It's incredible. And
how does this keep happening?
So I think part of it, it is mind blowing how close these are, how close, not just this 50-50 Senate and all this stuff. That kind of makes sense. We're a divided country, but how close some of these elections, the fact that Dr. Oz is the favorite to be a United States senator, the fact that Herschel Walker, who talks about, China stealing our good air, stuff that makes absolutely no sense to anybody. And, and it just fights it, says that he's against all abortion and then, has been paying for abortions, just, which I'm pro-abortion. If you're going to, great, pay for abortions. Absolutely. But the hypocrisy should be that there was a day not so long ago where being that kind of a hypocrite was the end of your political career.
Right.
And not only is Herschel Walker, he didn't resign, he didn't withdraw from his campaign when that came out. He's winning. And I think a lot of it is this, bizarre tribalism that we've seen just get stronger and stronger. But there's this thing about Americans where we, and when you're talking about the electorate, the electorate, I don't blame people. People are busy. We don't have time to pay attention to politics. We've got we're all just trying to get by and survive right now.
Sure.
But we are a vengeful people, politically vengeful. And our main political emotion is grievance, and we have this thing of like, we don't really look at what's going on. We just do a gut check. Am I happy or am I not happy? And a lot of that's influenced by the news and the media that I'm consuming. And if I'm not happy, then I look who's in charge right now, who's the most visibly in charge person, and what do I do to fight them? How do I take power away from them? And that's not a terrible instinct. The opposite, gives you Vladimir Putin and a 3-term, probably president for life in China. That's the opposite is this, just give people power forever. But it is a problem when we don't recognize somebody doing something that's good for us. When we have, we can talk about the legislative accomplishments and the executive accomplishments of this administration and Congress for hours. It's remarkable.
It's actually amazing.
It is. It's pretty incredible. Yeah. But the average American just kind of goes, well, bread is really expensive and gas is really expensive and Joe Biden's in charge. So I want to punish Joe Biden. I can't vote for him right now. So I'm going to vote, for Herschel freaking Walker. Like that is me by proxy punishing this person because I'm not happy. And it's a difficult place to be. And I think it's compounded by the fact that we're very evenly divided. We 50-50 Senate, almost exact 50-50 split in the House. And we haven't had a president win with like a landslide since the 80s, So we are you take those two things, we've got this sort of grievance and vengeance built into us, and, which can be positive or negative. We've got this evenly divided thing, and we just do this. Those two things result in this pattern of just handing the other party power basically every other election. A president will typically get about, if they're lucky, maybe 2 years where they have the White House and Congress, and they try to cram as much as they can into that time, because no matter whether they do well or poorly, we're going to take their congressional control away, and we're going to have gridlock. And I'm worried that that's what's going to happen for the next at least 2 years, is we're going to have Republicans take, even if it's just the House, it means that nothing's going to happen. They don't have ideas. They're not a party about making things happen. They're a party about stopping things and,
obstructionism.
Exactly. It's all about, no, I hate that. That's a dumb idea, bad idea, stupid idea. No ideas of their own, except for insane stuff like banning abortion nationally. And, so I feel like what we risk by not recognizing and politically rewarding things that help us in our lives is just this, constant gridlock. And it sucks. And it's, it is definitely the fault of a lot of people. But we as voters, we as citizens of this country are supposed to be the ultimate authority here. And we take some responsibility, plenty of responsibility, for how divided we are and for how impotent, our elected leaders are.
Well, that's the thing that's been on my mind. Definitely the last few days, especially. I don't know. I don't think that anybody that listens to my podcast is coming here to like have their mind swayed by who they're going to vote for in the midterms. And I think everyone's pretty much made their mind up. And I think that a lot of people that listen to my show think similarly to me, but also I don't think that everyone thinks exactly the same as I do. And I think that, but I just don't think that you and I are going to like,
sure,
be swinging many votes in this conversation. But I think it's just an interesting conversation to just talk about, like, why is the state of our union the way that it is? And why do we constantly shift our weight back and forth perpetually, and we keep trying the same thing and seeing the same results, and every time the one team has, I mean, God, it's been 2 years of a Biden administration, and people are just, oh, well, it's not working out. And again, like you and I talked about earlier, the accomplishments are many. The accomplishments are there. Like the administration has done a lot in its first, But if I can't see it at the gas station, if I can't see it, on my bottom line, or if my gut check feeling is just, this isn't really working out, I'm going to do the same thing that we always do, which is switch teams. And it's just like, but has that strategy ever worked? And I made an episode of this podcast probably like a year ago. I don't know how long ago it was, where I was talking about, and I was just sort of for funsies positing the idea of like needing an aptitude test to vote, like needing to be able to pass a civic literacy test of some sort, where you can like understand what is on the ballot and what, demonstrate some understanding of like what all this stuff means and what each person, just because I'm like, man, we let everyone do it, which is cool in theory, but then it's also this thing where I just think that I think that most people who are voting have no fucking idea what they're doing. Like, and it's just like, I made a video yesterday or 2 days ago, and I posted it, and I felt like what I was saying was pretty clear. And then the response of people in the comments I was like, this actually further bolsters my point and what I'm talking about, because the video is about like the current state of American politics. And I felt like there's 4 characters in the video, and one of them is like representing the problem with the electorate, like the problem with voters. One of them is representing like the problem with the Democratic Party. One of them is representing the problem with the Republicans. One of them is representing the problem with like third party anything, you know, whether it's green or libertarians or forward or whatever it is. But like in the video, I think it's very clear that there's only one option, that like there's one team that's like, hey, we're trying to get you some good stuff. So there's one, the Democrats are like, we're trying to get you free ice cream. We're trying, like, we want to get you free ice cream. The voter is upset that they don't already have free ice cream. It's like, well, what the hell?
What's taking
like,
so long?
What the fuck? You said free ice cream the last 10 times.
No ice cream ever might get me my ice cream faster.
or just, I'll get to stick it to you because I loved what you said, grievance. Just grievance and vengeance. Just, I don't even care.
Too.
And not only is the other guy, not only is the other guy saying no ice cream, the other guy saying the other guy's saying no ice cream, and then it's like, well, do you have any plans? And then the other guy trying to come up with a plan is like, I don't know, what if a dog ate the ice cream in front of you, shit it out, and then I had you eat the dog shit ice cream? And it's like, why? And it's like, I don't know, just because like I'm mean. And it's just sort of like, there is no comparison between these two things, and yet the voter character ascertains from that situation, well, you're both equally bad, both equally annoying. Like, your inability to get me my ice cream immediately is just as bad as this person sort of being evil. Like, and that, that position. So I hear this all the time in my comments too. People will just be like, well, I wish the Democrats were better at messaging. I wish they were better at like getting people to know about the accomplishments and I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. The information's out there. I don't know where you're not, like, it's out there. Like the Inflation Reduction Act was big news. The infrastructure bill was big news. Like, these things are like, it's available. Like, they're not failing to let you know. I don't know what's happening that you're not getting the information. Obviously Roe v. Wade was a huge blow, and it was really frustrating to a lot of people that why did we not already codify that? They were trying to. They did not have the appropriate amount of that. Again, that's why midterms are important. But like, when people say, well, why isn't this messaging more clear? I'm like, I don't know if it's that the messaging is unclear or if it's just that we have an electorate made up of people who are overly confident in their critical thinking skills.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's, I feel like it's everything. It's a little bit of every single, these are complicated problems because, and the solutions take a long time because they're complicated problems. If these were easy things, we would have done them already. All the easy problems are solved before they get to the United States Congress. The United States Congress, their job at least is to solve really big, complicated things. And that takes a lot of time. And that's frustrating for the average person who's suffering. They say, I need this now. I need to be able to afford a house now. And you're telling me that you're taking steps to do it, and that's frustrating. And that's understandable. I think it's understandable to be frustrated with the slowness of the process. And I'm a Democrat with a big D and a Democrat with a lowercase d. I believe in giving as many people the vote as possible. But it is frustrating because when people get frustrated, they lash out. I think as a group, that's something that we do as voters. We look at somebody who promised us to do something. They do it too slowly or not the way that we want them to. And rather than thinking, okay, what is in my best interest? We say, I'm going to punish you. I'm going to punish you for this so that the next time that you have a chance to do this, you'll remember that I punished you and you'll do it the way I want you to do it. The next time that you do climate change, you're not going to carve out these things for Joe Manchin because I'm going to punish you and I'm going to make you lose the Senate and lose the House. But people who care about climate change, we think that way, we get frustrated. I understand that. But if we give power to people who say, let's just give a dog ice cream and let it shit it out instead, that doesn't get us ice cream. That gets us no closer to ice cream. And it just means we're taking the power to make ice cream away from people who want to give us ice cream and giving it to people who have no interest in giving us ice cream, who think that giving people ice cream is immoral and fundamentally wrong and a rot of society, And that, I think, is a problem with, not an easy solution, because you're right. It's not, I get so tired of people saying Democrats are bad at messaging. They're not bad at messaging. Their message is just complicated. When your message is screw you, stop, I hate this, trans kids are bad, everything that isn't traditional Christian values are bad, that's easy and short to say. That's easy to chant. That's easy to put on a bumper sticker. It doesn't do anything, though. It doesn't help anybody. The things that help people are complicated. Solving a problem is much easier than squealing and throwing a fit about it, but it's a lot easier to remember a squealing fit than a well thought out argument, and I think that's part of the problem, is that, our country has the status quo baked into it. Something that's nice about our country is that it's very hard to get things done. Our government is fundamentally shitty and slow, and that's good in a lot of ways. It keeps us from doing extreme stuff. It'd be harder to do a Brexit in the United States than it was in the UK. It's harder for us to do big things, and that's good in a lot of ways. It does also mean that changing things is harder. Changing things takes a lot of time. It's almost impossible to change the Constitution. It takes 60 senators to do anything meaningful in this country. And that means that there's a bias toward the status quo, and conservative politics is an embrace of the status quo. So that it's always going to be, as long as we have this country, there's going to be a status quo that's going to be really hard to shake, and that is going to be wildly frustrating. But then we have the other side, which is you can't stop progress. Progress is inevitable. If enough of us want something to happen, it will happen. Even in Utah, Utah expanded Medicaid and legalized medical marijuana. Utah, the home base of the LDS religion, did these very progressive things because enough people wanted it. And progressive things that help people's lives are inevitable. It's just frustrating as hell to wait for it. And I get that, but if I can make an appeal to a frustrated Democrat who says, why should I give Joe Biden, more power? Why should I give Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer more power? They've frustrated me so much. Is, a nice old folksy Joe Biden saying, don't compare him to the almighty, compare him to the alternative. Look at what Republicans are saying. Don't take my word for it. Go to their campaign sites, look at what they want America to look like, and then ask yourself, am I more close to this position? Is this more likely to be better for me and my life and my family and my community, or this? And just make a choice based on what is best for you and your community and the people you care about. And, and if you do that, and you're somebody, who's listening to this right now, the odds are you're going to want to do everything you can to help stave off this bonkers version of the Republican Party that's taken over conservative politics in this country.
So Patrick Kennedy, who's always here in my comments, says Democrats are bad at messaging. They don't do near enough messaging. So again, Patrick, I would disagree with you on this. I think that I think you nailed it, Ransom, that you said it's not that they're bad at messaging. It's that the messaging is complicated. So people were talking earlier in the chat about bail reform. Like, this is a great example. It is much harder to message in a succinct way why it's important to not dehumanize people with the process of setting bail at such a high level that people are sitting in jail for
which is unconstitutional, by the way. It's against the Constitution. Yeah.
Right. Like
reasonable bail. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the idea that people should be presumed guilty and presumed as dangerous, violent criminals for any offense, and should so it's such an easier slogan for conservatives to say, liberals and leftists and Democrats are trying to release criminals out onto the streets. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to put dangerous criminals on the streets. That's easy.
Yeah.
That is an easy, neat comic book message. Like they're literally trying to flood the streets with dangerous criminals.
Yeah.
That's a really easy thing. It's much more complicated to say, not everyone who's in jail is a dangerous, violent criminal.
Yes.
And not every, and there might be some people who are being held in jail with bail, who maybe shouldn't be out on the streets. But bail reform would institute a series of regulations wherein, judges would have a system of criteria of like whether this person looks like they're a flight risk, whether this person looks like they are a risk to reoffend, all these different things of considering whether they would consider lowering the bail or letting the person out without bail before a hearing. Like, it's more complex than just flooding the streets with criminals, but the flooding the streets with criminals line is much easier to digest.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other line is it takes a minute. You have to actually go get into this and get into the real stories of like people who have been unconstitutionally held, for sometimes up to a year, sometimes up to a few years in jail, not prison, without a hearing, for crimes that they didn't commit. And even if they did, it's like you should be afforded the presumption of innocence until your guilt is proven in this country. That is the way that the justice system is supposed to work. But the messaging of, well, we don't want violent criminals just out on the streets, do we? Is much more effective and easy, and just it's just a simple sledgehammer message that's also highly disingenuous.
Oh, absolutely. And it's if you don't care whether you're telling the truth, it's a lot easier to be loud and to come up with something. It's easy to scapegoat people. It's easy, it's easy to be jingoistic. It's easy to do these things that are cynical and damaging and terrible, but very easy and effective and psychologically effective. Things that stick, and get into that reptile part of your brain, that really appeal to emotions. It's much harder to explain a nuanced position, and all the important problems have nuanced solutions. I think another part of the perception that Democrats aren't good at messaging is that this is a big party and it's got a lot of priorities. You got people for whom a big priority is abortion, and a woman's right to choose what she does with her body. And then you've got a big part of the party that's really concerned with kitchen table, blue collar, union, those kinds of things, and fair wages and lowering costs for healthcare. That's a big part of the Democratic Party. And you've got people who are who think that it's the most important thing to be protecting trans people and fighting for the LGBTQ community. And these are all parts of the Democratic Party who don't necessarily agree with each other. You talk to somebody who's one of these blue collar union Democrats, and they say, oh, Democrats, they talk too much about identity politics. They talk too much about gay marriage and gay rights and trans rights and how many genders there are and they, them and non-binary. And that's just, you can't win an election with that, And then you've got another group of people who say, this is very important. Democrats need to hammer home how that basic fundamental human rights are crucial. The most important thing you could talk about is a woman's right to control her own body, and someone's right to marry whomever they want to marry, and a kid's right to play sports. So we're a very big party. We're not a fall in line party. One of the old sayings is, Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. Democrats feel this need to feel inspired, and it feels good. Barack Obama inspired me. Bernie Sanders inspired me. Joe Biden doesn't inspire me quite as much, but he gets a lot done. He's gotten a lot more done than any other elected Democrat in a very long time. And that's worth looking at, and it's worth acknowledging and celebrating and encouraging by supporting it. The messaging, it's hard. Some Democrats are better at it than others. I think another big part of it is that a lot of it's local. If you look at how certain people are running their races, you look at an Alyssa Slotkins, you look at other specific races, you look at Raphael Warnock in Georgia. These are people who are communicating extraordinarily well to their specific communities, their specific constituents, the people that they're trying to reach. But that's not a national conversation. On the national, when it's the national stage, it is harder. And I think that the Biden White House does a really good job. I think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer do a really good job. But they're competing with people's frustrations. They're competing with, totally bonkers. You've got Elon Musk tweeting out insane conspiracy theories about Nancy Pelosi's husband, and Democrats, in addition to trying to make their case to the American people, they got to fight off all this insane stuff literally all the time. So I think given where they are, the Democratic Party does a phenomenal job. And I think that it's this fundamental challenge of it's harder to tell the truth about complicated things than it is to lie about simple things.
Yeah. I saw a TikTok the other day from a political TikToker that I like, who was just making the case that he was like, here's my controversial political opinion. I think Democrats have actually done a pretty good job historically, and it's like, as a liberal person, you're supposed to be like, fuck the Democratic Party, but I vote for them anyway. But like, he was like, it's so much harder to be a Democrat. It's so much harder to get elected because, Republicans, for all of their, it's a huge issue for them, election security and election fraud and making sure that Democrats don't steal elections. Republicans, like, in the open, cheat all the time. You talked earlier about gerrymandering. Like, gerrymandering is just a thing that Republicans love doing, where they're just like, oh, we're just going to cheat. We're just going to draw this map in a way that favors our race. And we're just going to, because we know that we don't have the appropriate amount of popular votes in these districts. So we're going to redraw these districts so that we can artificially manufacture the amount of votes that we need to win these races. And it's like, it's crazy that Democrats win at all with how much Republicans do to obstruct their ability to get anything done when they are in office, how much they do to obstruct their ability to run a clean and fair race. And then also just when it comes to money too, like, so many, the right has way, way, way more billionaires and big money in their pocket, because big money and corporations and billionaires like the policy positions of conservatives more, because it favors them.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Democrats are able to get elected and and get anything done at all is amazing. And it really speaks to, like what you said, like, you can't stop progress, and progress is popular. It is the popular position in this country to move toward progress, like on pretty much every single issue, on abortion, on trans rights, on everything. A majority of Americans believe we should have better, safer gun laws. A majority of Americans believe we should have gay marriage, and a majority of Americans believe we should be a pro-choice nation. Like, on pretty much every single issue, it is the popular position to favor progress. But as you said, our system is set up in a way that makes things take a while, and that is set up that way so that both sides can't easily completely flip the country into some kind of dream state for their ideology.
Exactly. And a nightmare for everybody else. If we had a political system where you only needed 51 votes in the Senate to do anything, there would be a lot of great things that would happen, right away. But
every few years.
Exactly. For a little bit. And then, if you imagine right now, it's so frustrating. Oh, you need 60 votes to do anything in the Senate. It's so frustrating. But if Democrats lose these Senate seats and, it's Ted Cruz running the Senate or something, Ron Johnson and all these people running the Senate next year, I'm gonna be real happy that it takes 60 votes to do most things, and that's part of our political reality. We don't need to accept that reality. I don't want to say, look, just stop complaining and deal with it. I get frustrated when people say my vote doesn't matter, the elites run the world, all this stuff. That is true. Is it true that a powerful person with a bunch of money has a lot more influence on this country than you do? Yes, but that isn't by design. The way that we're set up right now is that every person, every citizen, everybody over the age of 18 owns this government, and if we all voted, there are more millennials who are, eligible to vote than there are baby boomers alive. If millennials wanted to build a world that that they want to see. We could do it next week. We do it this Tuesday. If every millennial eligible to vote and, every Generation Z, eligible to vote went out and voted for the things that matter to us, whatever our political, wherever we fall on the political spectrum. I think this generation and the generation younger than my generation have great ideas. But we have to get out and we have to participate in it. And I know it's frustrating, but it's almost like you got to prime the pump a little bit. Politicians are obnoxious, and they are, they're self-serving, and you can let that be frustrating, or you can make it work for you. We get so frustrated. We say, oh, well, politicians, all they care about is the billionaires and old people and all this stuff that, and coal miners and all this stuff that I don't care about. They care about that because those people vote, because that's how they win elections. They don't, politicians have their own values, sure. But, the bottom line for them is winning. The bottom line for them is keeping their job. If every person who thinks that we should have universal Medicare or universal basic income or whatever, dream kind of thing, a Green New Deal with teeth in it, if everybody who believed in that went out there and voted for it, even if it didn't win, even if you didn't win this time, even if none of the politicians are currently putting that forward, that would show everybody, oh, geez, that's where there's some political power there. There's this big group of people who will vote for representatives and senators and governors and presidents who fight for universal health care. Okay, now that's what I'm going to do because I want to win. You don't always get to choose the politician who's saying what you want them to say right now. You choose the issues, and you choose them loudly, and then that brings them to you. And that's how it should always be. We are, of the people, by the people, for the people. That means the power is ultimately vested in citizens with the right to vote. And for anything frustrating, I get it. I get that it's frustrating, but you can complain about it. You can, yell about it. You can say, oh, Joe Biden is so fucking slow. Or you can get out there and you can be loud and you can vote and you can take action and you can make people do what you want them to do because they do work for you. But they only work for you if you tell them that they work for you.
Yeah. And it's like, and I've said this before, that like, I do believe that voters on the left in general do think more deeply about the decisions that they're making. And that's a good thing. And they are people that demand more and that want better results and that want to hold their elected officials accountable. And that's not a bad quality necessarily. It's a good thing, but it also is the thing that makes them get so frustrated. As you're like everything that you're saying, it's like, it's the thing that makes them go like, well, I trusted this person that I knew was already compromising more than I liked. And I didn't like that they were forcing me to compromise on my values, but they were a better alternative to this other person who's an election denier or who seems completely unhinged. And I trusted them with my vote and I gave them my vote and I didn't get the thing that I wanted. And that's frustrating. And you're right. It's like, your frustration is valid. Your frustration is valid, but punishing that person by refusing to let them keep their job and letting the opposition party take over.
Cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Cutting off your nose to spite your face. Definitely. It's just like, I get it. And but sometimes I just wish we're going back to the messaging thing. I do wish that it were easier to just drop a slogan for Democratic voters and voters on the left and have them fall in, because every time the Democratic Party tries it, every time they try to say something like Joe Biden tweeted the other day, like, hey, if you keep me in power, if we win these midterms, I promise you, we're going to codify Roe v. Wade into law. And everyone was like, bullshit, like bullshit. Like, yeah. And it's like, but all Donald Trump needed to say in 2015 was like, I'm going to build a wall on the southern border of the United States and And that's it. And like, and Mexico's going to pay for it. And people were like, I'm not even going to ask questions about how that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask questions about like how that would work, how we're going to get Mexico to pay for it, how that's going to stop immigration on that one board, like how that's not a massive waste of everyone's time and effort. I like that you proposed the concept of a symbolic racist gesture, and you have my unyielding, enthusiastic support for that. Like the concept, it doesn't make any sense what is being proposed, but it's build that wall, build the wall, like, and you can chant it. And the idea that it represents of just being like anti-immigrant, anti-brown people, you know, like that idea they like, and the rest of it doesn't need to make sense. But with us, it's like, you can't just say, hey, we're going to do this thing, this really good thing that needs to happen. We're going to forgive student loans. And people are like, well, how are you going to get that done? And it's like, well, we're going to start out with this thing where we're going to forgive this amount because we think that this is doable. We think that we can feasibly achieve this. And people are like, not enough, not good enough. Bernie said he was going to get the whole thing done. It's like, well, we don't have Bernie. And also, I don't know if Bernie would have gotten the whole thing done. You know, like we have what we have, and hey, we got something done. Like we got a ball rolling on a big complicated problem.
Absolutely, definitely. Something seemed impossible.
Yeah.
You know, a year ago, it seemed impossible. And, you know, when Elizabeth Warren said that she was going to cancel student debt, I cheered her on, but I thought that was going to be really hard to do, because it's hard to do anything in this country.
Right.
And not only did this administration do that, they did that and, you know, dozens of other executive actions, you know, pardoning federal offenders of marijuana, you know, possession of marijuana laws, you know, holding oligarchs accountable, punishing war criminals, you know, like 20 something executive orders, and then 17 at least pieces of major legislation. And it's almost like it's too much, you know, it's almost like the opposite problem. It's almost like, you know, how can I keep track of all these things that Joe Biden has done? And how can I, you know, oh, he's doing too much stuff. It's insane. From the American Rescue Plan, like months into the job, to you know, to the Inflation Reduction Act, which is spectacular, with a 50-50 Senate to be able to do something as ambitious as, you know, the Inflation Reduction Act, with all of its climate change action and really meaningful, very liberal, progressive wish list stuff. And it's almost like there's so much now that makes the communication hard. Which one do you tout? Do you tout the first major infrastructure bill in generations, something that we've desperately needed for decades, and we finally, and every president, you know, going back into the 90s has tried and failed to make a major investment. We haven't made an investment in infrastructure of this size since Eisenhower, for heaven's sake. And, you know, all we do is, oh, well, you know, not enough, not big enough, or too much. I can't pay attention.
Never enough.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
Yeah, we're like the never enough voters, the never, you know, and I all I want to say to that is like, well, we're not getting any closer to getting it done any sooner by contributing to the hemming and hawing. And
it's great to see not enough. Let's keep demanding. Absolutely. Let's make our government work for us. Let's make our government do the things that we want them to do. That's their job. You know, I pay a lot of taxes, and I want to see it do the stuff that I want it to do. I want it to do stuff that makes my life better, and the lives of people that I know better, you know. But let's not get so frustrated that we do something stupid, like give power to the people who want the exact opposite. You know, it's one thing to get frustrated. I understand that. And like, I get frustrated plenty. I'm frustrated literally all the time with my elected representatives. But, you know, and to give credit where it's due, and I don't want to seem like I'm beating up on liberals and progressives. Like, life is hard and life is complicated. And I get, you know, when you say that Democrats aren't good at communicating, that means the thing is that is true to you. You don't hear enough about what the Democratic Party is doing. You don't hear their argument because of a lot of reasons. You know, maybe it's that your life is really hard, or you've got a lot of distraction, or the other side is really loud. You know, if someone says the Democratic Party isn't good at communicating, I'm going to challenge that. If someone says the Democratic Party isn't good at communicating to me, I have no ground to stand on. That is your experience. And from your experience, you're not hearing what you expect to hear from these people that, that agree with you and that you are giving power. That's frustrating. But those are big problems that need big solutions. Americans are overworked, underpaid, stressing about their health, stressing about how they're going to, get to work, how they're going to even afford gas, to get around town. Like, that makes sense. And Democrats should be careful when they're, communicating about their successes, that they don't pat themselves on the shoulder too hard, because life is very hard for a lot of people. So I think I take a lot of solace from knowing the things that I want, the things that I vote for, the things that I, loudly yell about, are things that I hope will make it easier for people to be involved. Make it easier to vote, of course, make it easier to register to vote, definitely, but also make it easier to have time to think about stuff, because you're not constantly worrying about where you're going to get rent for next month, and those kinds of, I think the desperation, unfortunately, the desperation of the American electorate also plays into conservative politics, because the more desperate people are, the more distracted they are by all of the stress in their life, the more anxious and stressed out we are as a populace, the less time and attention and patience we have for these nuanced, liberal things that come across as egg-headed and, high-minded and, and privileged when I'm stressed to the max, when I've got $100,000 in student loan debt, and then I've got some liberal saying, hey, you got $10,000, calm down, be happy. What I hope is that as the inevitability of progress, as people's lives get better, as people are less stressed out and anxious, as medicine becomes less expensive and healthcare generally becomes less expensive, and people's wages, wage growth last quarter outpaced inflation growth, which is fantastic. People's real wages are going up. As people's lives get better, they have more attention, hopefully, more time and attention to spend on those nuanced kind of positions, which I think will bode well, for Democrats, who it looks like from where I'm sitting are the people fighting to make people's lives better and easier right now.
Yeah, it looks like it to me as well. There's a couple more concepts I want to talk about before we're done here. And one is just election security, because this is a huge topic of concern for voters on the right. That it's a huge talking point for conservative candidates, this idea that like our elections are not secure, our elections, we need to the elections, the 2020 election was fraudulent, it was stolen, Democrats are stealing elections. I personally am much more concerned about, when it comes to election interference, I'm much more concerned about what the political machine of the right will do than I am ever about what Democrats are doing. Mostly because the right does it out in the open, and they announce their plans openly, and they seem to get away with it. I think we've talked so much about people who are election deniers or these crazy conspiracy theorists. Like, is there a world in which you would question the legitimacy of, say, like a 2024 presidential election that overwhelming, like, let's say the Republicans overwhelmingly win the popular vote and the electoral college, and like it's just like this landslide victory? Would you look at that and go, I don't see how that happens, especially in a world where they talk so openly about like doing stuff like this, and about like, and there's such everything that they warn about, like there's such projectionists, like everything that they warn about, like, oh, groomers and people coming after your kids, it's like it's always conservative Christians that are diddling kids, like it's always that's the case.
It's not it's not the drag queens, it's not trans people, it's literally every time. It's, religious leaders, it's these conservative, it's elected officials, who are Republicans. Interesting. Yeah.
So it feels like anytime they're ringing the bell or saying, we got to be worried about these guys doing this thing, it's almost always a thing that they're doing.
Totally.
So it begs the question, like, if they did win in a landslide victory, even in these midterms, would there be any world in which it would be reasonable to go, hey, I know it just sounds like we're saying the exact same thing you guys said, but like, if anybody's cheating here, it's you. If anybody, which we already know that they are cheating in these like semi-legal ways, like with like gerrymandering and stuff like that. But
and
then
getting
doing
rid
things,
of ballot drop boxes, and cutting early voting and cutting vote by mail. Totally.
Voter ID laws and
actual voter suppression. Totally.
Yeah.
I think yes. I mean, so first of all, yes, there are absolutely scenarios. I think the American instinct, like our bias toward bullshit, I don't believe you, is a good instinct. I think that it's part of who we are as Americans. We say, I don't believe you. And if this election is very off from what the polls are suggesting, in either direction, I think that it's perfectly legitimate for people to say, I don't believe you, I don't trust these results. And that is what courts are for. That's what recounts are for. That's what election observers are for. This isn't what bothers me the most about the 2020 election deniers is this idea that like they know some big secret that nobody else does.
Right.
We take election security very seriously in this country. There's entire agencies, and parts of the government and independent, organizations who are all there to make sure that our elections happen the way that we say that they happened. And so, absolutely, if whatever the outcome is, there will be people who say, I don't believe it. There will be recounts where the law says that there should be recounts. There will be lawsuits where the law says there should be lawsuits. And after that happens, because we live in a nation of laws, a reasonable person says, okay, I fought it. I didn't believe it. I still don't like it. I still don't like that Al Gore, lost to George W. Bush because of the Supreme Court stopping a recount. I hate that, but I'm not about to put on a bison head and walk around, and go take a shit in the House of Representatives, or something like that. Because I'm a reasonable person and I believe in the rule of law and I respect this country's laws, even if I don't agree with all of them. We can't have a society if we're all just doing whatever we feel like all the time. That's chaos. You want to do that? Just, go live in the mountains and leave the rest of us alone. We're in a society. We have this thing called the social contract where we all agree to participate. And part of that is, I vote, I cheer for my candidate. I don't like the other candidate. And if the other candidate wins, I say, prove it, and if it's proven to me, even if I don't like it, even if I hate it, I have to, for this country to work, I have to say, okay, well, we'll fight harder next time, and absolutely, if Mike Lee wins by a landslide in Utah, I hope that there are people who fight that and say, I don't think so. The polls were saying 5% and you're saying 20%. And, there's these private companies that have relationships or whatever. I need you to prove that Mike Lee won by the amount that you say Mike Lee won by. And in 2020, we had so many, like at every level, it was checked and double checked and triple checked, and then went to court, and then went to another court, and then went to the Supreme Court. And over and over and over again, people were told, you've got your concerns. There are elections. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people. There are tiny little irregularities here and there. Nothing anywhere close to enough to have an impact on the outcomes of any of these elections. And the crazy people who are antisocial and don't respect the way that this country is designed enough said, I still don't believe you. I care more about this crazy ex-president guy, this known liar. I care more about him than about the rule of law in this country. What really, the thing is, if you want to yell and whatever, that sucks. The damage done to our democracy isn't just this perception of security in our elections, which is real. That is a problem. It's that it was used, as an explanation. It was used, as a pretense for actually damaging people and actually taking away people's ability to vote. Because if you get rid of ballot boxes, only in urban areas and not in rural, interesting, and you restrict somebody's ability to vote by mail, you restrict somebody's ability to vote early, then you're harming regular people who are too busy to take 2 hours or 3 hours or 8 hours, off work to go stand in a long line and vote. And that is voter disenfranchisement. It's voter suppression. It's anti-American. And it's a shame that it's been put in place under the pretense of this stolen election with absolutely no evidence. It's infuriating.
And it's so clearly done to target people, like you said, who cannot afford to take the day off. And what that means is they are targeting the lower class, like the working class. Like they are targeting working class people, and specifically because they know that those people are
Democrats,
are not going to vote for them. Like they know that. So if they can suppress that vote, that it's just like, it's so obvious the ways in which they openly try to manipulate the law to tilt elections in their favor. Somebody asked earlier in the comments, they said, Andrew asked in the comments, have Democrats, have the Dems ever had a president decided by the Electoral College? And I think what he means is, have they ever had a win where they lost the popular vote, but won in the Electoral College, like the way that Donald Trump did in 2016? And I think, like, surely in the history of the country, they have. But not recently. No, like
not
they have
the Democratic Party, what we call the Democratic Party now is very different from the Democratic Party of Andrew Jackson, for the reason we've been talking about. Today's liberal is tomorrow's conservative, because progress always changes. Once you've achieved what you want, you become a conservative. That's kind of human nature.
You want to maintain the status quo.
Maintain what works for you. Yeah. So that's a good question. That's an interesting bit of trivia. To my knowledge, I don't think that so like the modern Democratic Party, a lot of people put right around Harry Truman, because Truman, and that was a very close one. So if I were to guess, I would say, maybe Harry Truman is the closest that Democrats have ever come to that outcome. But you look at the Republican Party, and it is, the Republican Party hasn't won the popular vote with their presidential candidate since, I think, George W. Bush's reelection. So you've had George W. Bush, and then Donald Trump, and then Donald Trump. And in 3 of those 4 elections, the Republican lost the popular vote. And it's a wild thing. I think, today's Democratic Party, very different than, the Democratic Party up until about the 50s, when Harry Truman kind of split the party by being in favor of civil rights. And you had the Dixiecrats and the Strom Thurmonds, went off and formed kind of the basis of the new Republican Party, founded on racism, founded on identity politics and wedge issues. But I think since the emergence of the new Democratic Party in like the 50s and 60s, you've had, I think that as far as I know, no Democrat has ever won the election by losing, since then, by losing the popular vote and winning the Electoral College. And that is because the Electoral College is one of those things I was talking about, of the status quo baked into the system. The Electoral College was designed, this is a feature, not a bug. It was designed to slow down change, to give more weight to areas that are more conservative. And it makes it harder for us to have a really, to change too quickly when it comes to the president. It serves the same kind of purpose in the executive branch that the Senate serves in the legislative branch. It's this way to balance populism and democracy and, people who just want to change things. I think it's good for that tension to exist, but, it also, you would hope that a party losing the popular vote so many times in a row, they would eventually say, can we take some popular ideas? Can we try running on something that people like, maybe, instead, and win an election that way? You'd hope that would happen. Doesn't seem like it's been the case so far.
Well, this leads really well into the last thing I want to talk about, which is just sort of the concept of election reform, looking at our overall system. So you were just talking about our system, how like the Electoral College, it's a feature, not a bug. There are a lot of people who say we need to look at that. We need to look at whether or not that's still serving us. We need to look at things like the filibuster, things like gerrymandering. We need to look at things like the two-party system. We need to, obviously, we do have third-party options, but like they're not realistic options. We all know realistically in this country we have two parties. And what are your thoughts on things like the Forward Party, whose main platform seems to just be, we just want election reform. We want open primaries and ranked choice voting, which I don't think are necessarily bad ideas on their on their face, but it's just what are your thoughts on like what that would look like, what election reform would look like, and what the benefits or pros and cons could be?
I think you have sort of two standards of, you know, whether something's a good idea. You've got whether it's good, and then you've got whether it works. And things that are good don't always work. I feel like I would love to see a political system in the United States like what you see in a lot of the world, where you have, you know, 10 parties and, you know, 3 of them win the election and they got to form a coalition. They got to work together to form a government. It'd be really nice to see something like that in the United States, rather than our current system where third parties are 100% of the time spoilers and 100% of the time serve the function of empowering the people who disagree with them. You know, if you've got a Republican and a Democrat and then a socialist, the socialist is much more closely aligned with the Democrat with what they want to happen, but they split that, you know, socialist Democrat vote and they help Republicans win.
They almost do what McMullen is doing to the Republican Party in Utah.
Exactly. 100%. That is, you know, and that's happened, you know, throughout our history. And you look at early American elections and you can see, you know, you can watch the parties figure out, oh, okay, this actually doesn't work. If we want to win, you know, we're going to whittle it down. And now we've got this, you know, really difficult, very frustrating two-party system where people feel trapped in these two choices that they don't like. And I get that that's frustrating. I think ranked choice voting needs to come first. I think you got to put, if we try to, you know, elect third parties because they advocate for ranked choice voting, I think it's putting the cart before the horse, and it's not gonna work. But if we're seeing state by state, this is something I don't think we can do nationally. I think it has to be a state by state thing. You know, get involved locally, talk to people, see what it would take to do ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting does a lot of great things. Ranked choice voting kind of helps eliminate some of the crazies. You know, it lets you say, okay, I hate this person, but I don't mind this person so much. You know, I would actually, if it came down to these 4, and I have to choose one, I choose this one, but I would, you know, I choose this one and then this one. It helps a lot to get rid of the crazies. And I think ranked choice voting, you know, from my perspective, at least, it looks like the only real way to have third and fourth and fifth parties. I also think that these third parties need to get involved. What frustrates me so much about the Green Party, about the Libertarian Party, about a lot of these parties is you don't see them in city council races. You don't see them running for sheriff. You don't see them on school board races. You see them every 4 years running for president and ruining, you know, the election for the person more closely aligned with them. And that's point. Really, I think a lot of the ill will that third parties have comes from their, you know, their tendency to only get involved every presidential race, you know, when it's the most high profile, and spoil it, you know, be the Ralph Nader, you know, of the election, and hand the election to the person that, you know, that you disagree with the most, and not get involved with the grassroots. You know, parties can happen that way. The Republican Party was basically formed by Abraham Lincoln running for president. You know, like, you can start a party that way, but you know, I think the way we're so entrenched now, we don't just have parties starting and going out like we did back in Lincoln's day or back in Andrew Jackson's day. We've had 2 parties running this country for, you know, at least 100 years. And if we want to change that, I think it's something we need to do state by state. We need to change the way that we do elections to lay the groundwork for something like ranked choice, instead of, you know, first to the post, which has not proven very, very good for us. I would love to see a third party do well. I think it'd be so great. But if Teddy Roosevelt couldn't do it, then, you know, then I'm sorry. none of these libertarian candidates or Green Party candidates are gonna. I haven't seen any of them who are a better politician than Teddy Roosevelt, and he couldn't freaking do it. So that's, I think the two-party system is super frustrating. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to make multiple parties work, but I think that they're out there, and there are states who are doing it. They're deciding electoral votes by popular vote, or they're splitting their electoral votes, like you see, where Omaha gets its own electoral vote. If the whole state of Nebraska votes one way, everybody in Omaha is like, hey, I want to have a vote, and they do that. And there are several states that do things like that. So I think if you want to do that, get involved, do it. Find out what happened, what it would take to get it on, in front of the state legislature. Talk to your city council. Like those are things that can actually happen, and that probably need to happen. The electoral college is super frustrating to people. I think the electoral college serves a purpose, but it clearly is doing the exact opposite of what it was intended to do. The electoral college was intended to keep a crazy guy like Donald Trump out of the White House. That's the whole reason it exists, was to try to, to fight populism, and it ended up having the exact opposite effect. The person who won the national popular vote by a lot lost because of this, this thing that weighs, a state's geography more than the number of people who live there. So there are real problems. They're frustrating, but let's use that frustration. Let's make some change from it.
Excellent analysis. I knew you were going to kill it. I knew you were the right person to ask to do this conversation, and you did not disappoint at all. You really brought the thunder and brought the fire. I was like, oh, this is, yeah, you brought the goods today, my friend.
It's been a blast. It's so fun talking with you. We talked over pizza like the last time you were in Salt Lake, and I think we were just like out in the cold, done with our pizza, jamming along, griping, and that felt really good. I knew we'd have a good conversation today for sure.
Oh yeah, that's why I was like, oh yeah, duh, Ransom can do it. And people should know also, people who are listening, that like you're an amazing singer, musician, songwriter. They should go listen to your music. They should go stream it. Go listen to King Nico. Look it up on Spotify.
King Nico just put out a new remix album. It's really fun.
King Nico just put out a new remix album.
It's a good time. It's a lot of fun. I also want to say, we're talking about the like legal cheating and legal problems. The voter intimidation is just super quick. Voter intimidation is illegal. So the stuff you're seeing in Arizona, guys wearing masks and covering their license plates and carrying around guns, intimidating voters, that is a felony. Yeah. And if you're somebody who goes to vote, even if someone doesn't have a gun, it's illegal to even like electioneer, to talk about politics and try to change people's minds while they're in line to vote. So if there's a really tense environment, I would not be surprised if we see a lot more intimidation and electioneering than we normally do and we're used to. Because it's new, people might not know what to do. You might think, I'll call the police. The police that could make it feel even less accessible to a lot of people if there's a police presence at a polling place. So, what I will do if I go to my local election spot and I see some people, shouting at someone or holding a gun, which is illegal in most states to bring a gun and openly carry near a polling place, call 866-OUR-VOTE. That's the ACLU's, I think it's called the Election Protection Hotline. So 866-OUR-VOTE. If you see something weird,
OUR.
Yeah. Yes.
OUR-VOTE.
OUR-VOTE. Yes.
That's great information to have. Yeah.
Yeah. It just seemed like I'm worried about it. I saw people get pretty riled up here at the Salt Lake County building in the 2020 election. And, I went over and I confronted some people, and eventually this group left. But I wish that at the time I'd known that there's a number I can call to report it, and they'll make sure that it's handled correctly.
What'd you do? Did you go over and just say like, hey guys, do you know what you're doing right now is illegal?
Yes,
like,
I did. Yeah. And I got in a little shouting match, and then eventually they left. Yeah. I don't think I won though.
Yeah. Like you didn't like convince them that they were wrong, but like,
I think they just went to the next place to bother more people. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. All right. Well, thanks for joining me, and thanks for all the good information, Ransom.
Oh, thank you. And thanks everybody in the comments. It's really fun seeing people get involved. Even if we don't agree, I love, like, the worst thing that is apathy. You know, it's
Yeah.
never anybody versus anybody. It's like apathy versus involvement. So if you're yelling, if you're saying Ransom, you got it all wrong, I love it. And I love you for it.
Yeah, Patrick Kennedy, you know, I love you, and I'm glad that you guys are involved in the comments, and I agree, I concur. So, yeah, all right,
Thanks.
cool.
So
well,
Tuesday, next Tuesday, 1 week from today, mail in your vote. If you live in Utah, vote early, and don't forget to vote.
Do it. Get your ballots in.
Otherwise, you're just whining.
Yeah.
Thanks, Austin.
All right. Thanks, Ransom.
Bye.